I find it interesting that the first time that Moses was sent by God to the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to negotiate on behalf of the Hebrew slaves, what he was told to ask for was not exactly freedom, but rest. You heard it from our first reading today. God supposedly said to Moses, or told Moses to say to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, "Permit us to go on a 3 days journey that we may offer sacrifice to the Lord our God." The demand is for an initial 3-day rest in the desert in order to be able to worship. Akala ko noon siguro strategy lang to or a pretext that maybe the real agenda of Moses was to ask to be allowed to go to the desert para planuhin nila yung pagtakas nila. But more and more, I realized that God was teaching Moses to learn to demand justice for his people by starting with the most basic human rights, the right to rest or the right to a day off from work. Well, nowadays, we already take this for granted. Every worker has a right, a legal right, to a weekly day off and an annual vacation leave with pay. Imagine what it must have been like nung panahon na slavery was still legal. Not only were slaves treated like commodities, they were made to work continuously without pay and without the benefit of rest, a day off or a vacation leave. You're just a slave. You cannot even claim any entitlement. In the ancient Greek mythology, rest was considered a privilege only of the gods and of the ruling classes. Humans were supposedly created by gods to work hard, precisely thou so that the gods could live at ease and free from cares. And so those who lorded it over them also played God over them. Only they felt entitled to rest and to live a life of luxury while their subjects worked like beasts of burden. It is in this sense that the Israelite faith was in many ways very revolutionary. First, it is a faith that portrays God as a working God. Nagtatrabaho yung Diyos. He works for 6 days and He rests on the 7th day. Yun yung tinatawag na the Sabbath. Secondly, it refers to human beings as dignified creatures because they are supposed to have been made in the image of the Creator. Meaning, our work is supposed to be our participation in God's creative activity. We're not just creatures. We are God's co-creators. And like God, we should have time to rest and a time to consecrate the fruits of our labor. Kaya nga, yung third commandment, ang sinasabi ay, "Thou shalt keep holy your day of rest." In today's gospel, Jesus goes beyond the Jewish idea of work and rest balance. I think He knows that in this world, there are people who feel burdened and miserable, even if they have more than enough time to rest. And there are people who, even with very little rest, continue to live meaningful and productive lives. Jesus is trying to change our attitude, both towards work and towards rest. Kasi if we think of work as nothing but a burden, and if we do it grudgingly or reluctantly, it will really make us feel burdened and miserable. We will tend to think of rest as a chance to compensate for our miserable working days. Kaya may mga tao na kahit nag-long weekend na sila, they don't feel rested. And they don't feel motivated. They don't even look forward to working again. Something's wrong there. In today's gospel, Jesus says to us, "Come to me and learn from me." Meaning, we learn to take the yoke or the hard work or assume our duties and responsibilities in such a way that they don't burden you. They don't weigh you down. Posible ba yon? Yes. He says, if you do it with gentleness and humility of heart, if you do your work as an act of love, it matters a lot that we do our work with joy, with a sense of meaning and purpose. Kasi gaano man kagaang bumibigat yan kung walang kahulugan. At gaano man kabigat, gumagaan yan if we do it with love. It becomes a yoke that is easy and a burden that is light. You see, para kay Jesus, rest is not just about stopping from work. Si Jesus nga, he was accused many times of violating the Sabbath because he worked sometimes on the day of rest. He performed healings during Sabbath. Pero kay Jesus, hindi man work yun. It was not a burden at all. For Jesus, there was nothing sweeter than to be able to lighten the burdens of people who suffered. Merong isang salmo sa Old Testament that pronounces a curse on people whose hearts go astray and do not know God's ways. Ano yung curse? They shall not enter into my rest. And you remember also, when Cain murdered his brother Abel, ano yung punishment niya? God said to him, "You shall become a restless wanderer." That is why the promise of Jesus to his disciples is, "I will give you rest." We will not know the gift of rest for as long as we equate it with compensating for our miserable work. Rest is not about compensating. It is rather about consecrating. Consecrating our work. Finding time to lift up the fruits of our labor in prayer. Yun yung nagpapagaan. This is the work that Jesus calls a yoke that is easy and a burden that is light. And it is the kind that truly forms us in the image and in the likeness of our God.